Well, Adam's right. It is definitely a crisis, and it is definitely an opportunity. And in our industry, it's more than just the finances. Just to throw a couple of other stats that are interesting about what's happening in the public sector, this is the first time since the founding of our country, the establishment of the United States of America, that the largest funding source for state and local governments has been federal revenues. 26% of this funding for state and local governments comes from the U.S. federal government. It's never been anywhere near that. It's huge. Big change. A change in dynamics, a change in how strategy is set up, a change in how consortia build, a change in how solutions develop. I can tell you when I was in the state of Georgia, we were shopping for a contract vehicle to use to reduce our acquisition costs for IT. And there was a contract vehicle called WSCA that had all of the western states except for California. It was basically the mountain states, the desert states and the mountain states pulled together to try and get enough volume to be able to compete with the 11 or 12 larger states, try and get their pricing the same. And I was in Georgia, and I decided to join WSCA. But we were the 10th largest state at the time, and by combining WSCA and Georgia, we doubled the size of the WSCA purchasing pool, reduced their cost, or increased their discount from the vendors by about 1.5 points. And for Georgia, we got about a 2.5 point improvement by moving into that new model. And it broke a dam, if you will, because in the next couple of years, as many as 42 states have been members at any given time of WSCA. So despite the thrashing that I took in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for being a carpetbagger who came from Harvard down there and didn't know that Georgia was not part of the West, but was part of the South. I mean, literally they had front page in the Metro section with a geography lesson for me. We saved a ton of money, but the question that came about 30 days later, I got a visit from DC from the General Services Administration. And the guys from GSA came down and said, "What the hell are you doing? We've had a GSA contract available for state and local government entities to buy off of for years. And in fact, while I was there and while John was in LA County, they actually changed the rules of GSA to make it even easier for state and local governments to buy off of that contract. And no one, I mean no one, took them up on it. Every one of you, every one of your local governments is eligible. You can go right on there, get the terms and conditions immediately. It's pre-competed. There's most favored nation clause in the GSA contract, and none of us use it. Why not? Well, it has a lot to do with what Laclede said when he was first talking about the United States and this independent spirit and the spirit of federalism that we have, that each of us are independent entities. Each state government is part of a federation of states that makes up the United States of America. We are not driven by, directed by, or guided by the federal government in any area except for defense and interstate commerce. And our Constitution locks that in, and culturally, we've been acting that way for a long time. But I see a major trend change coming. With 26% of the funding coming from the federal government, with the president talking about transparency in those expenses and how that they're going to track those dollars not only through the federal expenditure to grants, which is how they usually do it, but through to the states who receive those grants, through the states to the local governments who get the authorization to expend, through the K-12 district who's buying a PC, and they're going to track how that dollar was spent from one end to the next. So what do we do? In exchange for that 26%, we agreed to give up the complete independence that we've had in the procurement process completely, totally, not just use their contract, but report back all of the details of our acquisitions, the partners we do business with, all of those sorts of things we do, make it available not only to our public constituency, but report it through the federal government to our constituency. Right? Not through our own websites, not through our own public disclosure, not through our own auditors, but through the federal government, report our detailed expenses. That is a fundamental change in the relationship between state and local governments. Next thing, and by the way, there's been no debate, no discussion, no controversy. It just came with the money. And you may not be seeing all the impacts of it yet, but you're going to. I was just in Minnesota with Governor Palty, who just a couple days before he announced he wasn't running for re-election because, frankly, I think he's going to run for president in 2012 for the Republicans. And he's as strong a candidate as I've met in the Republican Party around the country. Very smart guy, really gets IT in government and in education. But I was up there with Terry Takai, the CIO from California, and we were both on a panel with him. And we were sitting there. We had the CIO from the state of North Dakota next to us, who's got a big budget surplus this year, like a 12% budget surplus. We had people from the university system and from the healthcare system, and we're all having this discussion. And one theme I kept hearing over and over, and it's more so in Minnesota than other places today, but it's really catching on, is this concept of regional government. Right? That governor signed a deal with the governor of the state of Wisconsin. For IT, what they're doing is each of them is providing disaster recovery and business continuity for the other state. But they're also looking at offering software as a service for combined applications that they need in both jurisdictions. Instead of both buying and operating the same application, they'll run two instances that back each other up, but they'll actually run as a service off of a cloud environment that delivers that service to the state agencies. That was extraordinary. The other extraordinary thing I heard is the governor, who is the head of the Governor's Commission of the States on Education, which is a long-running activity. It's a partnership between public and private sector. In fact, Lou Gershner, for a very long time, ran it from the private sector side, and my governor, Roy Barnes, ran it on the public sector side, and I participated pretty actively. But one of the things the Governor's Commission is asking for is standards for education. They want a standard for Algebra 1 that is constant across school districts across the country. Unheard of. Those of you who work in school districts know that the school board wants to retain complete control over their own. You guys are down in Southern California. I'm in Northern California. When Oakland school board had to give up control to the state, it was a huge, how we're losing control over what our kids learn, et cetera, et cetera. Today, what's happening is that we are talking about a variety of standards set by the federal government for acceptable practices in math, science, English, how we're going to lift all of the kids, how we're going to measure the No Child Left Behind is not going to get weaker, it's going to get stronger. There's going to be hopefully some funding that comes with it this time to implement it, but we're going to have common standards of how we measure success, we're going to have common standards of how we deliver. This is part of that 26% funding that's coming down. The idea that we can work better and collaborate together in order to solve some of the challenges that we've been addressing one by one.